I never thought that board games could be so terrifying. Actually, never mind. Greg and his girlfriend act insane when we play Catan. Literally insane, but that's not the point. That is not the point. Listen to me, okay? All right. I saw Abigail Cyrus. I know I sound crazy. I know that sounds impossible, but I know I saw her. And yes, alright, yes, I realize that I'm saying that I saw a witch's ghost. I get that. I get how that probably sounds, but let me explain to you what I saw that night. Let me tell you how it happened. A little bit of context. Every Tuesday I host a game night at our local history museum. It has always been a ton of fun. A group of people, usually the same 5 or 6, gather together in the basement of that building and spend the evening playing board games. The museum itself is rather modest, so the building is just a very old, very large mansion house on the edge of town. Most of the main floor has been stripped, changed into galleries and exhibits, but the basement and the second floor have been mostly preserved. Like, for example, on the second floor there is this long, snaking hallway and several smaller rooms. Being up there, it's clear that those rooms used to be bedrooms. And, of course, like all old buildings, the place is rumored to be haunted. It is, said that the ghosts of the family that last lived there, which was in the late 19th century, still haunt the halls, including, classically, a creepy little girl in a white dress and a stately older man. And the most famous ghost, Abigail Cyrus. I'm a huge history nerd, especially with the history of Grayton Heights, so I know everything there is to know about Abby and about her alleged ghost. It is said that she appears to people as a woman in mourning, dressed in black, which is funny because she never really cared for her husband. In fact, it's said that she had a hand in his death. And when I said it's said, what I mean is that was never officially confirmed. It's one of those pieces of history that is assumed by the people who know the most about it, i.e., me. Mr. Ephraim Cyrus went missing in the forest that surrounds the manor house, the manor house that I currently work in. And on the evening of his disappearance, a few locals reported a large, flickering fire in the woods, and they reported hearing many voices raised up, chanting, singing. The tiny Grayton Heights constabulary investigated, tracking through the black forest to get there, but when they arrived, all they found were the smoldering remains of a huge bonfire. All that to say, Abigail Cyrus was a strange woman. Living in the late 19th century, her obsession with the occult was considered odd by those around her. Her library is still full of some old, archaic, yellowed books with crude symbols and demonic drawings. I've pored over all of them, and I cannot for the life of me make sense of them. They are written in some sort of strange language with odd symbols. Surprisingly, given the budget that I have, I was actually given funding to have linguists come and examine the books, and they did, and they could not tell me what the books say. They couldn't even tell me what language the symbols are. Really, if Abigail Cyrus wasn't a witch, yeah, she certainly wasn't doing herself any favors. But the museum has always capitalized on the mythos surrounding Abigail, especially during Halloween. They spookify the place. And when I say they, I mean I spookify the place, turning the old library in the basement into a dark, sickly lit witch's lair. Abigail's laboratory, I call it. And yes, my manager does force me to dress up in a Beetlejuice suit and lead Halloween-themed, witch-themed guided tours. I never said the job was glamorous, but being in the museum is like working in the shell of someone's life, an ancient life. But before I get into this, I need to make something clear. I am the only permanent employee that works inside of that building. It's funded and managed by the municipality, so my manager works in an office down the street. The job, it can be boring and it can be lonely, but trust me when I say that I've never seen a ghost in that building. I embellish the stories for the few visitors that we do get, but I've never seen... I never saw a ghost, I guess, until this incident. Like I said, the building is on the edge of town, and by that I mean that it is further up the street that takes people out of Grayton Heights, the street that leads to the highway. The closest street lamp is a few meters down the road, so the place gets no illumination in the evening. It's a dark fortress surrounded by woods. When you drive into town, the museum greets you. When you leave, the museum bids you farewell. It's like the tomb of Abigail Cyrus watches over our town or something. Ooh, that thought makes me shiver. Okay, so this happened towards the end of summer when the evenings get cold and the days get shorter. The mornings are full of sun, dew, and wasps. The night is full of chilly winds and forest life. It was the last Tuesday of August, and as always, I hosted a game night in the wood-paneled basement of that museum. My friends came, and we spent the evening playing social deduction games, the Resistance, Coup, etc., etc. And we try to stay away from Catan for reasons that I've already stated, but this story starts at the end of that event. This story starts when I was saying goodbye to the last group of people that had come for the game night, which was Greg and his girlfriend. I walked them outside, gave them a big hug, and watched them get into their car and drive away into the night. By this point, it was around 9:30, so the moon was high and bright in the sky, and the chilly air was full of the sounds of chirping and buzzing. I closed the front door. Shutting out the whispers of an incoming autumn, and I began the process of locking up. I walked through the dark bowels of the building. The exhibits were sneering at me from the sides. Large plastic spreads of information, ancient clothing, dolls, mannequins. My footsteps were echoing through the black halls. I walked down to the basement, which, as I said, is mostly comprised of a large, dark, wood-paneled room. It's where we host field trips and events. There is the old library where the dusty, archaic books are displayed, and then another smaller bedroom in the basement. But I didn't bother with those two smaller rooms. I kept the light on as I started to put the board games away, closing the lids, separating the cards, and sliding the boxes back into the shelf. And then the basement ceiling creaked. I stopped putting the boxes away and listened closely. It wasn't unusual for the building to make noise. It was a very old house with aging joints, but this sound had been different. It had sounded like a footstep. So I kept listening, and sure enough, there were more noises, more steps directly above me. I froze. I straightened from where I had been leaning down. I was keenly aware that in order to get out of the building, I would have to go through the area where those footsteps were coming from, and my brain was racing through the possibilities. Could one of the board game players have returned? That was most likely, right? That's what I told myself. That was most likely. Why was I nervous? Why were my palms sweating? I decided that it wasn't anything to worry about, but I still tried to stay quiet. I crept up the stairs and emerged onto the dark main floor. At the other end of the building, the front door was open. But I had shut it. I had definitely shut it. I looked around, trying to ignore the dark, menacing exhibits around me. I called out, "Hello? Did you forget something?" But I heard no response. I listened for someone to talk. I listened for the sound of more footsteps, but there was nothing. Just the constant chirping from outside, the hum of the late summer night. I walked to the front door and I shut it, making sure to lock it this time. Suddenly, the interior of the museum felt massive. There were too many dark corners, too many places for someone to hide. Beside me, black stairs led to the second floor. Down the hall, more stairs led to the basement. I felt small. I felt insignificant. But nobody was hiding. That's what I told myself. Nobody was hiding, and I was being ridiculous. So what? So I had heard a few noises. So I had left the front door open. This wasn't a big deal, right? The red light from the security camera blinked above me, offering a modicum of safety. I breathed out a calming breath, took a few moments, and then decided to finish locking up. I walked back down the hall and to the basement stairs, and I almost took the first step back down to that wood-paneled room, but then I heard something down there. I heard something coming from the basement. There was rustling. There was moving. There was the sound of someone going through something down there. I was frozen at the top of the steps, staring into the basement, unable to see anything beyond the space surrounding the bottom step, but I heard something. I heard something clearly. It's difficult to describe the sound. I can't really think of how to put it into words. Imagine someone shuffling through wet cardboard, or maybe imagine the sound of someone going through a box and accidentally sticking their hand into something that squelches. Whatever it was, there was a constant, unfamiliar noise coming from below me, slightly muffled, as though the noise was coming from behind a door. If I hadn't been panicked before, I was now. There was someone in the building. I opened my mouth to say something, but then closed it. My instinct was to be quiet, and I decided to listen to that instinct. I stepped away from the basement stairs, walked down the main hallway, and stopped at the base of the steps that led to the second floor. I stood there, a good distance away from the basement stairs, keeping my eyes on the far side of the hallway. I watched, so sure I was going to see someone come up those steps. I was ready to sprint out of the museum to escape from whoever this was, but nobody came up. I stood there for at least 10 minutes. At least, again, that's what it felt like. But I didn't see anybody. I crept back to the basement stairs and listened. The sound was gone. The basement was quiet again. I steeled myself, I opened my phone, and I got ready to dial 911. And then I walked down into the basement. With each step, my heart beat faster and faster. When I reached the bottom of the staircase, I looked around, eyes scanning the large, mahogany-colored room. I looked into the squat, cozy library. I looked around the old basement bedroom, which was basically just used for storage, but I saw nothing. I saw nobody. I blinked at the emptiness, wondering if I was going crazy. I turned off the lights in the basement, plunging the space into blackness, and suddenly I felt the distinct sense that I wasn't alone, that there was someone down there with me, in the dark, watching me. But I walked back up the steps and closed the basement door. For once, for the first time, I wished that door had a lock on it. But of course it didn't. So I had to trust that my search had been thorough, but I was beginning to have my doubts. And on that point, I decided to do one check of the security system to ensure I hadn't missed anything. So I walked up to the second floor, walked down that long, narrow hallway, and entered into the staff room at the far end. The computer monitors were lit up, showing 2 blue-tinted surveillance feeds, one from the main hallway on the first floor and one of the exterior of the building. I sat down at the chair and reversed the footage to show me the last few minutes. I expected to see nothing, but I saw a flash on the screen. I stopped the footage and then I let it run. The clock on the bottom of the screen was flashing the time. It was showing me the footage from about 10 minutes ago. I saw myself on that video surveillance creep down the main hallway and then walk down into the basement, carefully, slowly. I stared at the screen for a minute or so. There was nothing, just the empty main floor. But then a figure dressed in black emerged from the basement, from where I had just gone, from where I was. Obviously, I hadn't seen them down there, but they had been down there with me. I hadn't been alone in that basement. I hadn't been alone. Their face was obscured, but they moved swiftly and smoothly, gliding down the main hallway and out of the front door. I can't really even make sense of how she got out of the museum. She got to the front door and it seemed to open on its own right before her, and she left and then it closed behind her. They were dressed in black, all black. Their clothing was loose and it flowed behind them, and they were wearing a veil. Or at least that is what it looked like. I couldn't help but think that it was Abigail Cyrus, that she had been down in that basement watching me. Goosebumps exploded over my skin. I wanted to cry. I turned to the exterior camera, but I saw nothing. Wherever that figure had gone, it wasn't shown on the exterior camera. The person glided through the hallway, through the front door, and then disappeared into nothingness, as if they evaporated in the summer air. At that point, I was so desperate to get out of that building. I didn't even think about calling the police. I turned the lights off, I locked the front door, and I sprinted to my car. I turned my car on and sat inside of it for a few moments. I looked back at the empty, dark mansion beside me. I looked at each window, into the blackness behind the glass, and I didn't see anything. But I kept watching, waiting for a figure to appear. I kept expecting the face of Abigail Cyrus to smile out at me, but nothing appeared. The bones of that old house stood there, as they had for more than a century, vacant and isolated, surrounded by the dark woods. The next day, in the safety of the morning light, I unlocked the front door and crept into that building. I was still nervous, but it was empty this time. No more steps, no more figures. But oddly, I later discovered that some of those old, archaic books were missing. Abby's books. It was reported to the police, but nothing ever came of that investigation. So, yeah. That night, I saw the ghost of Abigail Cyrus, and I think she may have seen me too. Before taking back some of her property.